Hey y'all, it's evening time now, but earlier this morning I had a chance to go see some old friends of mine, Chris and Nick, and somebody they work with also named Sam, and talked to them a little bit about the Shuffleboard project. Nick had actually seen the article I mentioned in my last video, and he was like, some of this stuff is really resonating with me. Specifically, I think he said, let every voice be heard. They're really having some issues, or trying to figure out how to do communication at a large scaling technology company. And specifically, as you'll see, around this area of this early collaboration, early idea making, getting to consensus, and then documenting and sharing that stuff. So very relevant problem, potentially something that Shuffleboard could solve. I did a bit of a discovery interview with them and a usability test. So check it out. This is the footage from my talk with Nick and Chris and Sam.
Well, thank you guys for coming and chatting about this thing. This has been a fun project. I don't know what you know about it. I forget what I've told you guys about the project.
I know nothing except for a vague.
I know more than
Yeah,
most.
and I remember you were working on it. It was when someone posted that article a week or two ago. I was like, oh shit, that's right. And this is super timely because we were just having a conversation about collaboration tools, particularly ones that could support remote work. Because we have a couple people exploring that. We want to build a bigger remote culture. And then there was one comment on yours that stuck out for me, and it's like making sure that quieter voices are promoted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you've been in a meeting with me. That's an issue I have because I like talking.
Yeah.
And we definitely have one or two people here who have opinions, but they're totally happy just sitting on the windowsill, not saying anything until prompted, right?
Totally. So. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad that ran true because I think that's a really important piece. And it's funny. I've heard as much, although I've heard people occasionally say it would be good if quiet people like me's voices were elevated. Mm-hmm. More often I hear, I talk a lot in meetings, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I want to elicit more people's feedback who aren't me. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. I've always, if there's a quiet moment, I'm happy to say something. I'll talk.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, I know.
Excuse me. Well, if maybe we could start with just like some early discovery stuff. I just have a couple questions for you guys about what sort of the use case that you have in mind would be, and maybe just some questions about how your team does collaboration in general, and then afterwards we could talk about the product itself a little bit. I can introduce what I'm doing, but I don't want to spoil
So
the pieces there.
we don't really have a lot of, there's zero tooling for product or application designing, right? It's usually just we're fucking around on a whiteboard or sitting next to each other, or we're not even talking, we're just doing it, right? So there's very little tooling in that regard. Only just now developing some processes around retros and other kinds of planning that tooling is becoming a want, right?
Yeah.
We've used a retro platform once. Which one did we end up going with? I can't remember what it was called.
Parable?
Mm-hmm.
Parable, that's right.
Never.
And it's fine, it's sort of very specific for retros, right? So I'm looking for a tool that would allow ideas to be shared and commented on, promoted, demoted. They could also be, like, being able to use it for retros would be great as well. And again, voice matters in retros because it's easy to put something up there and just not talk about it, right? And then as we're thinking more about a remote culture, we need to be able to plan better, we need to be able to organize better, and without having to use massive enterprise suites to figure this shit out, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of tools are just too big. Something that has the simplicity of a Trello board that isn't a Kanban board could be ideal. I think you get more buy-in for a simpler tool than you would something that's overwhelming and cumbersome.
I think transmission of ideas is a big one. In whatever form it takes, whether it's a post-it representation or some sort of text box to type into. there is a lot of stuff gets figured out at the whiteboard, drawing through an idea, and we all just sort of stand around and go back and forth, and then we do try to document, but keeping it in a place where people know where to look for it, make sure that it's in a form that can be redigested once re-examined at a later date, is difficult. And when the culture of ideation happens at the whiteboard, once you are out of the office, everything bottlenecks.
Yeah.
Because we all have laptops with touch screens, and some of them have pen capabilities, but there aren't very good tools that are web-based to draw an idea, have someone else see it, have someone else come in and sketch on top of it. We've looked at a few things. We've looked at the Google Jamboard. We've looked at. I've been trying to get a old cloud application called Space Deck, which is now open sourced, up and running. It's just a collaborative whiteboarding tool. Things are either not well stalled and not being updated, or they're cloud service, or they require expensive hardware that is not scalable for a small distributed team. Like, we can't get $3,500 Jamboards in everybody's basement. Like, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
You know, I would even be okay with a system that allowed us to take our photos of whiteboards and just attach them to ideas.
And you know, when you pull up your tripod, I've been looking at, there's a similar one, but it actually points down. And so the idea is like, okay, well maybe, it's cheap, it's like $30, you just take your phone, project it down, I'm drawing in my notebook.
Yeah.
And you can see that. Now, you can't add on top of that, but it shouldn't be too hard to, in Meet or Slack, for people to switch presentation mode and someone else sort of jump in and jump on top of it and make their own version of it to continue the idea. But that still is that satisfies the cheap and easy, and not necessarily the rich and storeable retrieval.
Yeah. Totally.
So we're just sort of trying to play around, push the edges a little bit, and see which feels the most fluid, which is the most economical and scalable, and which allows us to store information in a way that it can be retrieved, cross-referenced, easily organized.
So I think it's probably going to end up being a suite of tools we're going to need, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the actual collaborative whiteboarding experience will be something entirely separate. Not I really think that a couple tablets here and there will solve that problem. But once that session is done and there's something that's a diagram or whatever that has been produced, what happens to that? That's sort of what I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
Where is that persisted, and how is it associated with a certain set of ideas?
Yeah, because what ends up happening is we come to the whiteboard, we document out ideal diagram, and then people leave,
And then it just,
and you can't sort of reference back to it, but also people leave the room with then different assumptions even.
Yeah.
Say the conversation, say your meeting's about to end, you got to cut it short. There's no way to reference back to it and just be like, okay, what did this actually mean? It's still just kind of nebulous.
Yeah.
well, and also just being able to, or having to exit quickly and then move on to the next thing becomes very difficult to then take that next step, pull it out of the whiteboard's
'Cause then you
channel
can't-
and put it somewhere
Yeah,
where
because
it's
then you can't
referenced.
amend the whiteboard.
Yeah, my dream is to have a knowledge graph and everything.
A what?
A knowledge graph.
Yeah.
So you have these ideas that branch out and they can cross-relate. We put everything in Drive. It's a folder hierarchy. Things that we are working on do not live in a strict and enclosed space and are not subject to hierarchies. They flow into other things that we're doing, and there's a tremendous amount of cross-referencing. And so finding tools that allow us to make those levels of relationship and traverse laterally between ideas, between systems, between services that we're working
And
on.
also
Quick
capture.
time check. What's in
1016.
Okay.
And also capture conversations the relationships between things or different ideas. And one thing we had difficulty doing is this given idea, it was implemented in a certain way. We all understand it in a certain way, but why? Where were the conversations? The whiteboard pictures.
Mhm.
You have the output, but all the conversation is lost.
Right. There's no
Why? What was the path that got us there? Why did we decide on this particular thing? There's no way to capture those thoughts. There's no way to capture the disagreements.
Mm.
Because there could easily be 2 or 3 spots on a whiteboard diagram that are in contention. They're settled on that for now. There's no way to know that unless you were there when it happened, right? And there's no way to promote the dissent to make sure that that's captured. So when we run into a problem with it later, we can say, oh yeah, so-and-so actually did call that out as a potential issue. And we can consider the alternatives here because it was a known risk, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, oh God, nobody thought of this. We say, no, we did. This is okay. This was a known risk. Just things like that, you know.
Interesting.
But being able to do it in a way that,
Yeah. For me to.
and we're going down a rabbit hole right now.
No, this is all really useful and relevant.
One last tunnel. In terms of like the interrelationship of things, one of the reasons why I think it's important to be able to move laterally across topics is if you have a service and another service is blocking progress on the first service, I should be able to look at both service conversations and see, like, if we don't fix this, service A will not be able to move ahead with what they're doing. But service A usually is the owner of that conversation saying we are stuck, and service B continues to march on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, there's no perspective. The perspective gets lost when you start documenting things in like flat documents.
well, and the glue between these things just lives in the heads of the people who had the conversation last, and do not get documented with the other observations and the other other details.
And just to be super clear, like these are like, so you're an engineer also, you are working with like some, you know, some literally like an engineering service that might have some issue and is preventing some other thing from being built or shipped. And there's like some coordinate, we're talking about like 2 different like things, that you, like this is code that depends on the code generally. Is that the things is that the sort of material we're working with usually, or is there something else?
I'd say there's some meta constraints too, just like decisions that were made that might prevent certain thoughts from moving forward. Like this is a blocking assumption. How do we address that assumption and separate it and decouple it, and then hopefully move in a direction that we want to go without letting those assumptions block?
It could be in like service planning, like the code
Yeah.
hasn't been written yet.
Right.
But each of these different teams, each of these different services have concepts in the pipeline that could block one another.
Interesting. Right.
And doing one would prevent the other from happening, or at least happening in a timely manner or without significant impact. Right.
Yeah.
Even just things as simple as what are we calling thing A?
Yeah.
Right. We've bitten
How many
ourselves
different
in the foot.
names do we have for it?
Yeah, and reconciling naming in one service with naming in another service, and keeping track of mapping concepts from one service to another, right? We just had an issue with that yesterday, you know?
Actually, 3 times yesterday.
Just keeping track of the translation between different domains, and making sure that sort of knowledge is gathered in a way that's not a fucking wiki, because no one's gonna read it. You read wikis when you're onboarding, and then you never look at them.
Well, I mean, I think wikis from a data input perspective is not necessarily bad.
No.
You are creating your topic, you are tagging what areas it intersects with, you are linking to related topics. The problem is if all you're doing is looking at the screen in front of you and going left, right, and just sort of shifting your context from one screen to the next, that's different from being able to see the tree and being able to see how information branches out and to see what's related to what, and being able to pull away and get that big picture.
So what are you guys considering using besides wikis?
For just general knowledge and meeting notes and everything, we've been
Notion.
settling on Notion, which is pretty good. I think it's less of a collaboration tool and more of a knowledge store.
Yeah, I think Notion is a much cleaner data input, but it does not solve the breaking out of the hierarchy and understanding the interrelationships. I don't think it solves that problem.
Yeah, there's a theme here of, you articulated it in a couple interesting ways, but like, you know that thing where like every piece of work just becomes a JIRA task, and then you have like this like super rigid structure of like this is what's supposed to be done. It seems like there's this interest or need to like talk about things you said with the ease of a Trello board, like lightweight, maybe not super structured, not locked down, not committed, like more of like a practice space for ideas. Is that
Yeah,
something that resonates
it's a
with you?
practice space for ideas. Ideally, to continue with Sam's idea as well, a practice space for ideas where you can also capture the relationships between different ideas. That would be good.
What would be an example of this relationship connecting history, path, stuff?
I mean, just being able to understand the structure of our data model across various services, so that I'm trying to like paint it in my head so I can describe it. But
I might stick in with this.
Yeah. That's fine.
To give an idea, if I had a whiteboard diagram of like one service architecture or a data model, what would be wonderful is if I could then associate with that a handful of notes or cards that were useful bits of information about a particular piece. And I could also tag that space of that diagram, and it could relate to another conversation and another diagram, and say, this is how these things relate. These are the discussion points we had among them, these were the disagreements. This is how we arrived at this visual knowledge space.
Yeah.
These were the tickets, the cards, the concept associated with them, right?
yeah,
So,
if you see the description,
like identifying a connection between something and using cards or conversations to connect them, right?
Yeah.
That would be cool. Just going.
no, I was, it is resonating with me. Like if I let's just go back to the data model, and I see a schema for a particular set of data in a sidebar or in some sort of visual relationship, I can see ongoing conversations, problems that have been recorded. I can see where other places where they're implemented, and if I can see how they're being consumed by another service, and I can see that they're labeled differently and they're called something else once they get beyond the boundary of that service, those things are easier to understand.
So, like, stepping back a little bit, like a tool like that would be a very specific domain tool. Like, in a very general sense, I'm thinking more about when we are whiteboarding, when we're thinking of how to do these things, how are we capturing the different ideas we're pointing, and how are we connecting them to each other?
Yeah.
Before we even get to the idea of a service or an architecture, we're talking about ideas. We're having conversations about ideas, and then we need to
Problems that we're trying to solve.
problems we're trying to solve. The solution for that could be an architecture, could be a service diagram, could be a literal graphical design, visual design that is up on the whiteboard. All of these things are potential outputs, and I want to see the conversations and the ideas. Like, how did we arrive at the solution? Like, there's this idea in the ancient writers called a palimpsest. You know what a palimpsest is?
It's a scroll that you can erase and start over.
Well, it wasn't erased, it was stacked upon each other, right?
Okay.
And archaeologists can actually go back and peel back the layers, and sometimes it's the same thing, just modified in certain ways. So your resultant scroll is the palimpsest. It's like melding a bunch of different ideas until you actually get the output, right? And I would like to be able to do that. I want to see how different ideas were promoted into the final product. Whatever that product is, whether it's
Follow the decision tree back to the original ideas.
Yeah, and then to be able to then connect the dots there, because in some of the ideas that didn't get promoted in output A, some of those might have been assumptions for project C.
That's super funny. John Cutler actually just put out a Twitter post where he was talking about that, where once you arrive to your final decision, that is like your green, your good decision. What you lose is the capturing of all of the thrashing that went before that until you see it kind of baseline out.
Because the thrashing is
because then what you do is then all you see is the output. It's just like, well, why didn't we do this in the first place? It's just like, well, there was a bunch of work, there's a bunch of concerns and assumptions that were wrong to begin with, course corrected and stuff like that.
Or that were
that's
very much what you're talking about.
And I want to be able to relate that to other services. Like, one of the ideas that would get thrashed out, maybe it was present because it has a relationship to another thing, right? And I would like to be able to see that connection and see all the thrashing there. I think I want to be able to capture the thrash.
Well, and also I think it's important to be able to capture it even after the fact. Once you say you start with 10 different things that are all spread apart, and you realize that this one thing, initially what you thought was all by itself, but then you're like, oh wait, these decisions over here can link back.
Yeah.
So there's a way to retroactively even.
And you can probably even then discover where your assumptions came from. You'll have an assumption, not sure where it comes from, but then you could look at this and see, ah, shit, okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Knew there was something.
Because then I think there's something in like the knowledge loss of when one person has a realization, there's still most often the person that continues to have that realization, and you go back to them, they're the keeper of that tribal knowledge, where if there's a way to capture when somebody has that realization, embed it inside of your documentation, whatever sort of space that you have, where it's just like, so-and-so realized this, now it's connected, now you can't lose it.
It's some sort of system that's like the village elder that you can always go to.
It's actually really great.
Right.
But you also, I mean, like, we were just going back and forth about how do you capture what the bad assumptions were. Sometimes you'll have good assumptions and you'll forget why you arrived there.
Mhm.
And that's
Right.
also
Yeah.
equally
Those are
important
also
to be
important.
able to myelinate and
10:28.
10:28.
Alright, I'm gonna dip. We got
Got it.
stand
Stand up.
so.
Cool. See you soon.
Yeah, man. Nice to see you.
Thanks for taking time. Appreciate it.
In terms of tooling, I think one of the things that would be important in this endeavor is to make sure that the act of constructing these elements is something that you can do as part of the meeting and it's not intrusive. You should be able to capture these things on the fly without having to put a lot of brain work into it that would take you out of the thrash, out of the meeting.
I mean, it's almost like Git for arriving at understandings.
Yeah, but if you're shitty at
Well,
Git,
yeah.
it's hard to do the right thing.
Sure,
You're
but-
totally right in the way that it.
Understanding like what changes were made across what files or concepts or areas of concern.
Yes.
And then being able to see the commit tree of like, at this point we, understanding our current bottlenecks, understanding bad performance here, understanding friction between this thing that we built and this thing that we're trying to build.
Yeah. It's just a monologue.
Yeah, we came through these following understandings and moved in a certain direction. And being able to go back and say, all right, now that we're in it, maybe that wasn't the right idea. Maybe the original idea that we had was actually the one we should have stuck with, but we weren't quite far enough along to understand that it was the right thing to do.
The ability to do a git blame on design.
That's dangerous.
Two shitty ideas.
I've heard people they remap it to Git praise.
Yeah.
Whose great idea was this? But yeah, you want to follow the trend back.
Yeah.
I think about the idea of intuitive ideas, and like good decisions are basically, it's like, okay, just because an idea is intuitive or makes sense at first guess doesn't mean it's the right decision.
Right.
Good decisions are non-intuitive ideas that you commit to. That said, just because an idea is not intuitive doesn't mean you should do it. Sometimes the intuitive ones are the right ones, and so you can't just look at it and pattern match. You have to say, wait, what is the context? Who was talking about this? Why did we come to this decision? Who agreed? Who disagreed, and why?
Yeah.
This is awesome.
And actually, those are kind of like the elements, ideas. Who agrees? Who disagrees? And was that promoted into a decision?
Yeah. I'm thinking a little bit. One way I've described this tool is a machine for consensus.
Yeah.
Like does that resonate? Like how to have a bunch of ideas. Step one, get a bunch of ideas. Step two, like vote, prioritize, help people like mix and match and thrash. I was thinking like jam thrash. That like the turbulent like gauntlet of ideas getting through, and then three, it's not about like printing PDF, it's about like documenting consensus at a point in time.
Yeah. And whatever that consensus happens to be. Like,
Right.
In theory, the consensus could be a single idea, a
Right.
single concept. It could be a visual output. It could be an architecture design. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like consensus is a thing that everyone is agreeing on.
This is awesome. Yeah, totally. Well, you guys, I'm telling you, you guys have so many good ideas, and the way you've described this is really interesting, also very unique from other folks who have talked about this. I think you've got like a very interesting obviously sort of an engineering perspective on it. We're talking about getting ideas, plus a pretty high a degree of awareness of the importance of an idea, right? Like the importance of this conceptual decisions at the beginning, and that they make a big difference in your work, and the importance of communication and how that interacts with your real work. That's really cool.
I think one of the things that I like about this engineering team is that a lot of us are super pedantic academic assholes about a lot of things, and so we will talk more about the process and the discussion of things and the maintenance of the knowledge, like as much as we do the engineering specifics. Most of our meetings, well, a lot of our meetings in the last couple months in particular have been about the process and collaboration, more so, and there's not a lot of, tribal opinions. There's not a lot of, this is just the way you do things in engineering.
Right. Yeah, totally.
We're about to go through a pretty substantial growth phase.
Yeah.
So the goal is like we
Solve this stuff
need to
now.
nail our primitives right now.
Yeah.
Because it's about to get harder to manage.
Yeah, totally.
And it'd be nice to have something useful in place, so that as people come on, we aren't trying to figure shit out as we're growing. We've had this team pretty static for most of this year with no changes, and I think we all know each other well enough and know the platform well enough and the problem space well enough that we can try to implement some best practices and find the right tooling for growth in a way that will maintain the positive aspects of what we currently have. And that's my opinion.
Totally. No, that's really helpful for me to understand, I think, like what motivates somebody, what condition they're in that would make them want to make a commitment to a new tool, because new tools are hard. There's a learning process, sometimes it costs money, there's all these other pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've got a good idea of like what is the state and the pain point and the personality type that says like, no, this is something that's important to us.
Mm-hmm.
Couple quick questions, and then maybe I might take a break with the recording, and then we can do a demo. But it sounds like I heard a lot you guys talk about drawing and diagrams. When you're thinking about these ideas, to what degree do you imagine them as visual, like drawing ideas, versus text ideas, or what format do you think about them in, and how confident are you in that?
It depends on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you have to get into a higher context, and there's interrelationships between things, like you kind of need to draw it out.
We draw all the time.
Yeah, and if I'm doing like some sort of documentation or something that I'm gonna pass around, I'll use Draw.io or something where I can take a little bit more time to kind of put everything in the exact right space and make sure it's got a nice icon and things like that. But like to just get a thought out in order to within 20 minutes or less come to some understanding, like you need to be able to just sort of quickly jot things out, and like it can be hideous as long as it conveys the information. And just in terms of like some of the drawing tools we've been playing with, just little things like latency or not having a good pen stroke makes it very difficult to create a quick like glyph that represents something that another person can understand within 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And then
Which is why we end up going back to physical whiteboards.
Right.
And a lot of our conversations, even if they start in code, as soon as it gets beyond the scope of like 1 to 2 sort of knowledge space jumps, you're like, whiteboard. Let's go back that one real quick. Just so we can understand the picture, and we'll stop thinking in terms of code and thinking in terms of domain spaces, right? And services talking to each other. Because we can draw things, point things, and it's easier to do that than trying to hop down around different files in code. So unless you're talking about a very specific space in your platform, a lot of the conversation happens out loud as you're drawing. It's a very visual process, right?
And drawing is a thinking tool too.
Yeah.
Like when we were trying to figure out how to represent this thing in your head, drawing it in some sort of like a spatial model helps you think quickly too.
The act of drawing itself helps you think about it. I mean, there's been all these articles in the past month or two, studies about like meeting engagement. People that doodle in meetings tend to be paying more attention than people who just sit there.
These are dry erase tables for
Oh, that's a good one.
they're glass tops, you can just draw them.
That's awesome. I'm a believer in thinking by drawing. For sure.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a hardware problem. If I boot into Windows and use OneNote, it draws really well. If I boot into Linux or try and use a web tool, it draws really poorly. The screens and the capabilities of the pens and like the tooling is all there. It's just having either bandwidth or concern to go the last mile to make sure that it is a smooth process. And like very few places have done that unless they're charging an outrageous amount of money.
Yeah, and even then,
Or OneNote's not like a great tool for sharing and like.
but once you have that, regardless of what platform or how easy it was to produce the drawing,
Right.
none of that captures the ideation that went into it.
Right.
None of it captures the relationships between these ideas. That to me, the final drawing is this consensus object that we've arrived at.
Right.
What led up to that? What were the ideas? Because a drawing doesn't capture discussion.
No, but I'm just thinking in terms of like, there are lots of tools if you're just doing text input to be able to cross-reference things. Not all of them are in a like task format, but the actual act of thinking quickly is a problem that I think also is a very early stumbling block in this type of a tool. Once you have a drawing made, like if I take a photo of a drawing that I did, I can put it into a lot of information systems and we can get a lot closer to this problem. When you're remote and you're trying to convey that idea, having that like drawing layer nailed, I think unlocks a lot of problems or unlocks a lot of momentum building.
Yeah. See, I don't know if I want to conflate the drawing tool with the thrash capture tool.
That's my question. How are they related? Do they need to be tightly integrated?
I don't
think so.
I don't know that they are necessarily conflated, but I mean, if I
wouldn't want them to be the same tool.
No, but they have to be stored in the same set of records or referenced.
Yeah.
Right?
You'd have to reference things, right?
Yeah.
So in my idea, whatever tool is capturing thrash, you should be able to point to specific points in time and connect that to, like, okay, we have our really good drawing tool that we're using.
Mm-hmm.
We can say, all right, export it in this current state. I think we need to capture this, and then reference that capture somewhere. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want it to be one and the same. I think that's an overly complex solution.
I'm just thinking of it in terms of.
Because we need to be able to capture thrash for things that aren't drawings as well.
No, I hear that. I'm just thinking in terms of like, we have very limited amounts of time that we carve out to, like everything's heavily time boxed to reach consensus, to walk through problem spaces, and then we take a picture, it ends up on whiteboards, and then it just like sits there and dies.
Well, that's what
And so like the it sounds dumb, but the like exporting and saving to the desktop file system and then uploading it into the system are these extra steps that like it's not the end of the world to not have it, but having that step be streamlined makes the whole system work in a stronger way, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
Totally.
And I think if the goal is to quickly move through an idea, store it, make sure it's referenced, make sure it is the thrashing is properly documented. But like those things have to work smoothly together.
Yeah.
I agree, but I think those can be solved by two different platforms. My issue would be if I wanted to try to capture the specific ideas in a text form and capture the relationships between different phases or even different components of a drawing. Even just the interface that needs to exist to capture that is so fundamentally different from what you need out of a drawing tool.
Yeah.
I think they should be separate, and you can be able to reference different assets, whatever that might be. Because it could just as easily, that this knowledge graph we're constructing could just as easily point to different permutations of text documents.
Right. I mean, I guess all I'm saying is that if the goal is to reduce data loss, corruption of the idea, as you're trying to document how you work through these problems, like it doesn't have to be the same workspace that you're operating in for 80% of the conversation. But if I have to leave that conversation, especially where I have textual references, jump to another application, work in that space, transmit information back over into that space, and then reattach it back to the original document.
So I don't see it going two ways. In my
Well, there's
mind,
other tools.
in my mind, I see people collaborating in a drawing space and someone else is maintaining the ideas as you're going along.
But I would argue that I should be able to like click on a button and have like a modal pop up, and maybe one user is operating in that space.
Yeah.
But it should be within the same application.
Well, I'm also keeping in mind that the amount of work that would need to go into the construction of a drawing tool of that caliber is colossal.
Agreed.
Enterprises can't solve this problem.
I wouldn't say they can't. I'm saying
They haven't.
What?
They haven't. I mean, look at how much work we just went into trying to figure out what we could, and our solution was, well, we should just get a bunch of tablets. Because nothing else is great.
Can I just try to summarize it this way?
Yeah.
There needs to be a tool for managing ideas themselves that is supporting thrashing, which involves speed, lightweight, like no super strict ontology that is captured and shared. Part of those ideas needs to be drawing tools. What's not necessarily important is that they have to be in the same tool. It doesn't sound like there's a huge collaboration need for drawing, like you know, edit erasing somebody else's stroke necessarily. But what I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
But I do. It does sound like what you need to be able to do is make a drawing very quickly without the tool getting in the way, and then get back to that context of ideas. That's the biggest critical.
Or even have them fluidly transmittable across contexts.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not saying that this isn't hard. I think a lot of people design tools from the, if it does too many things, I won't be able to sell it. So we're just going to focus on this one little space. And I don't think that people haven't built the right thing because it's an unsolvable problem, because they're choosing the wrong problems to solve.
No, see, and
But just to finish the thought, what I want to convey is, if the goal is to very quickly work through a problem, draw all of its nuances, and then store it in a way that's retrievable, in my mind, that's how it should work. How hard it is to get there is irrelevant to my...
See, my thought is that I think you're too tightly coupling one specific problem-solving method, and that's drawing, right?
I'm saying from our context, that's where we do a lot of our...
But it's not the only,
solving. No, of course not.
right? And I would suggest that coupling it too tightly with the concept of drawing would be limiting.
I'm not saying the whole interface should be a drawing tool. I'm just saying it, to the extent that there has to be drawing to work through certain ideas, I shouldn't have to leave the application and transmit context back and forth between those things. That's it.
I think that's a
I
good
don't know
brief.
if you- what's
Like,
that?
I think I understand that brief. Like, it makes sense. I'm really encouraged by the fact that you don't think that this needs to be one big. Like, if it's not a world, then because you know, if that was what I needed to build to make it work, I would want to know whether or not I can build it, because I can just stop the project because I won't be able to accomplish that. And I'm encouraged to hear that you think it doesn't need to be that way, but it's also encouraging to hear you know, reinforce and say, hey, don't just splash like a drawing tool on here that's half-assed that requires like file upload, etc. Like, you know, if you're gonna, my takeaway is I can build separate pieces, but if I were to work on a drawing tool, I'm not gonna bother shipping something unless it's like real quick, however that is. And I'll explore, you know, maybe there's something where an iPad where I can open up another app and like embed it or draw IO and plugins. There's a million solutions, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think I have a good bar for what I need to do there.
Okay.
Let me ask you about web-based. You mentioned web-based, because that's something I've been wondering about. Does this need to be a native app? Sounds like web-based is a big pro for you.
It is. I am, not that the rest of this conversation would have indicated this, I'm super opinionated about the web as a platform, and I generally dislike the points of integration that native apps tend to deliver. Again, that's not necessarily because it's a innate capability or lack of capability in native apps, but it's the way people tend to design native apps. That it is, I will work in this space and will upload it to a cloud account. I have no control over ownership. I can't use an API to move that data somewhere else. I can't integrate it into other things. It is a closed box, and it is constructed in a tight way.
Yeah.
And I feel like the web as a platform is designed for exactly this type of stuff. Like, how do you take just disparate concepts that at the end of the day all boil down to the same types of problems that we're trying to solve, and allow data to flow between systems. I think the web is just a much better tool for that. So I'm a heavy advocate for the web platform.
Good to hear, because I don't know how to build native apps.
Okay. A lot of native apps are just web underneath anyway. So.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think I've focused less on like the look and feel of native and focused more on like, you should be able to join this space, this Thrash space, very quickly,
Yeah.
which means no installation.
Right.
Yeah.
Last question that's like coming to mind right away is like the places that you anticipate using this, because I totally agree that this a tool that would help this Thrash space. The things we've talked about that I'm most interested in is this Thrash space, the idea of lots of different ideas and how they sort of bubble up and create consensus. I totally think it would exist. It's a focused use case, and it would exist in a world of different tools. Which contexts do you see that kind of Thrash space tool working best? We mentioned retros, obviously potentially something like engineering discussion about engineering solution alternatives. Is there anything else that you imagine this working well in, or how did you imagine it working?
Certainly planning.
Yeah.
Planning, interesting.
Process design, when we're talking about how we want to operate, because there's lots of ideas thrown out there, and we arrive at a consensus, and that consensus matters,
Yeah.
right? Because it will affect our day-to-day in fundamental ways, so being able to capture that.
Incident reporting.
Yeah.
All good ones. Is that sort of like, okay, we're gonna have a retro on something that happened not in our sprint, but on something that went
Or-
wrong?
We have a system failure. There's a service right now that is out. What is the problem? Like, how did this happen? What are our paths for remediation?
Gathering all the ideas, planning, and then connecting them to.
Yeah, and like, okay, how do we fix this problem right now? How do we fix the problem having it started in the first place within 3 weeks?
You guys are blowing my mind.
We just had to say.
Okay. fresh on the brain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this
The
is
wound
cool.
is still healing.
Yeah. This is really that would be such a cool use case of like, okay, hey everybody, red alert, drop what you're doing. We need to have a conversation right now about what we can do now, in the next hour, and the next day, and the next week. Let's go.
Right.
And you're in Singapore, so how are we gonna make this happen without like half interrupting each other over a Skype call? Like, well, there you go.
Well, being able to convey that timeline, like when you're in the middle of a crisis, being able to like think clearly and document exactly what time you did what thing is incredibly
Just a
important.
timeline view for ideas in general would be great.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
but like being able to then say, go to our CTO and go, okay, this is what happened. We're 5 hours in. Here's the timeline, and they can just sort of follow along. Being able to then give that to the support engineer for the vendor whose tool exploded would also be incredibly helpful. So there's a lot of I think a lot of consumers of that type of like Thrash record.
Very interesting. I would be curious, even if I didn't build something that was super useful there, that seems like a super interesting source of inspiration as an artifact of like, how do people thrash? Like, checking some IRC logs somewhere of like, what happened?
And what are the consumers of that, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm just an engineer wanting to go back and explore a knowledge space, that's different than someone that's like, okay, take that thrash, give it to me in essentially like the Git log
Yeah.
with timestamps.
Or
Right.
shit, this happened before. Someone that person's no longer with the company. What did we do last time?
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of use cases for having that detailed and as much granularity as possible without having to like enforce that each person is curating it exactly the right way. Because right now we just open the document and drive, and it's very like
Yeah.
I mean, you could attach thrash spaces to like Git repos. Say, okay, we're thrashing on this service right now. Just keep track of like the commits, pull requests, and incorporate those in the thrash space.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, being able to
thrash space.
Yeah.
That's like a dimension that I want to live in. Go to thrash space.
Put the guns on.
We're gonna use this room in 10 minutes, but
Okay. Cool.
just come crash party.
How much time do you guys have after that? Because I would love to talk to you for as much time as you have until noon, but I don't obviously want to take up your entire day.
Am I in this 11 o'clock meeting?
Nope.
I have all kinds of time.
Well, I would at least like to demo with you, and I'd love to have you join, and you
Yeah.
and Chris, if you can.
No,
I
wait,
was
switch
gonna
on to it.
say, I had a BI conversation,
Okay.
but the skybox will be available.
Okay, pretty good there.
Well, maybe we could take a break because I'm pretty sure that's going to run out of memory eventually, and then I'll move that over to here and get us set up again, and then we can do. I want to ask you guys like what you're hoping I demo to you, and then we'll demo and see what
Yeah.
you think.
Okay.
Cool, we can do that. We can use the collab space too. If that's okay.
Yeah, actually, if you want to use the cloud,
Just screen, you can pass it if you want to.
You have to get on the desk Wi-Fi, but.
Okay. This is awesome. Like you guys have clearly thought about this. There's a lot of little moments of validation happening, which is nice. A lot of like ideas of things I could build. I'm seeing like a massive future roadmap that is terrifying but awesome. And just like the way you guys are thinking about this is really solidifying to me. I think people talk about a lot of what this process is trying to find the right market for the tool. And like the ultimate way to slice and dice people, sometimes people say is like psychographics. Like, what do people believe? What is the situation they're in? Like, the worst possible way to sell something to somebody is say, like, I'm selling to males between 35 and 45 years old who are white. Like,
You're my
okay.
demographic.
Yeah, like that doesn't. But if like the way you guys talk about beliefs and wanting to improve your process and like share and capture ideas is like super awesome and just super something I'm really resonating with, and I would really hope to be able to solve those. So that's super cool.
Sweet.
All right, quick break. Back in a few minutes. All right, so we're gonna do a little demo, and you are casting.
I will be.
Before we start the demo, what are you hoping that this demo looks like?
Solve all our problems.
Solve all the problems.
All of them.
Do you have anything in mind?
I think just being able to take a first step towards being able to have two people not in the office share an idea with some visual representation would be fantastic.
I don't care about the representation. I just care that they're ideas, and we can have differing ideas and have a way to come to consensus about an idea. Whether it's visual or textual, I don't care.
Yeah.
I just care about the ideas themselves and how they're transformed. Some are promoted over others, and there being some kind of paper trail. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's run through maybe doing like a quick test retrospective.
Mm-hmm.
This will be a usability test, so standard usability test rules apply if you've ever done it. Basically, just think out loud. If you see something, say it. I want to hear what's on your mind. I'll ask questions. You can ask me questions. I probably won't answer them. Please do ask if you want. Okay, great. Actually, I'm gonna make you steer
All right.
because I want to see
Where am
how
I
you
going?
steer. Go to getshuffleboard.com. And the first thing I want to do is get your guys' thoughts on the marketing and landing pages because I want to see how well I've articulated the idea we've already talked about. Could you go to stage.getshuffleboard.com actually?
I can.
Okay. So what's the first thing you notice on this page?
It's a nice infographic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I see the join wait list,
Okay.
which
what does
means
that
I
look like?
can't use this yet.
You can.
Right. But as a user, it's like, oh,
Disappointing.
Well,
Or
yeah.
what is the feeling?
Well, I see the key word there, consensus.
Okay, good. Is that what you're?
I mean, that's just as we've been discussing. How do we record the idea process, the thrashing around, as we get to consensus and be able to document that? That was.
So that's jumping
I
out.
noticed the word immediately. So.
And that's an appealing thing to notice for you. Like that is encouraging and hope. It's a good word for you to notice.
I think so.
they're in a retro.
Yeah. Does that what does that board make you? What does that make you think of retrospective? Obviously.
Yeah.
Especially with the
You
title.
said 2200?
And
If
post-it
it didn't
notes.
have the title, I would definitely think it was like a Kanban board or something.
Okay, good. What do you normally do when you land on a web page like this? Are you a video watcher? Are you a scroller? Are you at 2 seconds and exit if it's not?
I'll scroll for a couple seconds, see if there are any screenshots of the interface itself.
Yeah.
And you say, hey, it's now December 20th, I'm moving out to January.
Full clarity, I have been to this page before,
Okay.
but
Sure.
it was briefly because I just scrolled through. I never read the small text. I read the headlines of each subsection.
I usually just try and get as much detail out as I can. I like watching videos. I rarely have time to sit through them, so I usually just pull as much textual information out as I can.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what are you taking away from this page so far based off of the scanning that you've done already?
I will say it doesn't immediately jump out to me as an ideation space.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the value prop is. I understand it's some kind of collaborative tool, something that allows people to centralize thoughts and ideas, but beyond that, I'm not really sure.
Okay, so sort of a vague collaboration tool notion, but not a lot of specifics around the value it's providing exactly.
Yeah.
I would actually, just given the conversation we had before, I would almost say that this infographic is too specific.
Interesting.
Too specific to a, like, ideas have already flown, work has already been done, now we're just reviewing.
Interesting. This sort of looks like after the fact.
Yeah.
To you.
This is like looks like a reconciliation process.
Interesting. Yeah. What do you if you close your eyes and picture like the in progress or we're about to do this process? What does it look like to you?
I mean, in our context, I would say it's much more sketching out an idea at the whiteboard,
Right.
and then, like, I don't know, someone taking notes, or that there is some documentation of the idea happening. But
And
again,
that's
I don't know what the
for you,
actual
that's like
application
sort
looks
of a
like.
visual. Are you thinking diagrams, or are you thinking more like?
Definitely not like a stock photo-y thing. I think a infographic representation of, because you can, for one, you can get a little bit more meta and, fantastical universe. You can apply the sort of like metadata over the human interaction in an infographic space.
So maybe I'm hearing like just more tangible examples of what those ideas would look like rather than just empty post-its.
Yeah, or flexibility, because retro is sort of a rigid sort of meeting.
It's also
Where-
a full market. There's a lot of
Yeah.
like tools for that.
I'd like to be able to do something in retro,
Yeah.
like use a tool like this for retro and other things too, because it's still maybe a transformation and it'd be good to tie ideas together.
Right.
But having that as the only example up here maybe limits my perception of what this can do.
Yeah. If I
Like,
can't see what's
that's a
inside.
specific idea of collaboration. You know?
That's one specific. What would be an alternative idea that if you were to contrast that with something else?
In terms of a visual representation,
Like what would you not include from the retro format in your Thrash world? For example, the columns, the post-its.
I wouldn't have columns.
Or post-its.
Well, I'd maybe have post-its. I would maybe have people drawing on a whiteboard with call-outs.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, like, in retro we use post-its to define topics to dig deeper on.
Yeah, I mean, it looks exactly like that.
Yeah.
Right.
When we're trying to solve work through an idea at the board, there are no post-its.
Yeah.
What is there? There's obviously diagrams. There's words.
There's a lot of words. There's arrows between words. There's
Yeah.
there's relationships between ideas, relationships between features. There's a lot of erase marks.
There's some wild gesticulation and it doesn't make it to the whiteboard.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying that somewhat seriously.
Something that captures revision.
Yeah. Or
Revision.
negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. This is all making total sense, and I think this is. I should have said, by the way, this is a pretty rough version of what we're looking at. This is like our first pass of stuff. So this is intended to do exactly what we're doing now, which is like figure out as a way to spark what we really do want to see. And I think I'm hearing more concrete examples of what this thing actually looks like. I'm hearing ideally more flexibility than the retro format, specifically around associating ideas with other ideas and maybe people's reactions to those ideas. Are those the two big themes? Maybe?
Yeah, and that's a big thing that we're running up against in the tool that we're using now is we're able to capture what people are putting into the retro space to talk about, but there's not a good mechanism to capture the discussion that happens from those post-it notes.
I mean, I don't even know that it has to be more specific, or there has to be more specific examples. I would almost say, if the goal is to say this tool will help you in a variety of different scenarios, you can almost take those 3 infographics and like Venn diagram them, and where they overlap is like a rendering of your interface.
Right. And so what would be, if you were to remove an element from this and add an element, what would you do to make that Venn diagram more accurate in the center? Put that more in the center of that Venn diagram.
I would move the retro piece down into a corner, and then I would have like a whiteboard scenario intersect with it, and then a third scenario that I don't have a clear picture of yet right now, but like however many scenarios you want people to think about your product with, I would make sure that there's some representation of it and that they overlap, or that they're bulleted out. I mean, it doesn't have to be that particular, that's just what conjures up in my head, but like I feel like at a bare minimum you would want to like hero out the different scenarios. I think it'd be more effective, just from my own aesthetic, to like show them all in the same space.
Yeah.
See, I actually like seeing them all in different spaces, because I feel like that implies that it is like distributed collaboration, right? Like you have these 2 remote folks up here, you have this person probably working from a coffee shop, these 2 people on site, and this person's phone. Like I really like what I assume is trying to imply that you can collaborate from anywhere, do your work all together but separately. I just think the contents of this board maybe are a little too focused.
Yeah. And again, if you were to make that less focused, you would maybe show connections between post-its.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I would
reactions.
get rid of this what went well this week, like, because that like straight up is like this is a retro.
Right.
And
So even if you didn't have that,
it would be more general.
Yeah,
and I think the columns would still imply like a Kanban board or something. So I could definitely see maybe some graphics here that are more of like a mind map or a graph and nodes. So
have you guys tried virtual whiteboard tools?
We've just done a thorough
certainly
review of
tried.
those, yeah.
One of the problems we're running up against is kind of hardware for those. We've kind of been playing around with Jamboard, and we have touchscreen laptops, but the latency is so bad that it makes collaborating on documents really painful for everyone involved.
Yeah.
On iPad, it's great, but the bidirectional aspect of it is pretty difficult right now.
One thing I mentioned earlier, and I've been thinking about this when you were talking about the latency. If you boot into Windows and you open up the OneNote application, it actually draws really smooth. It's not
so
the hardware. It's the amount of
probably
time
some
invested,
drivers, yeah.
or just the amount of time invested in making it a fluid. I'm sure Microsoft would.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're running up against. But yeah, I think that could be really helpful.
Yeah, one thing I'm trying to figure out is one of the things that people who have tried virtual whiteboards complain about is like the skeuomorphic nature of like dragging post-its around, and that like when they have an idea and the post-its are the same, they have to drag them on top of each other. If they want to move a bunch, they have to like drag the right direction to highlight and then move them, and so there's this. I think I'm trying to avoid this. And just full transparency, like I'm trying to get to a fluid way of working that matches how people manage ideas without like introducing a lot of work to manage the board itself.
Right.
And I'm trying to strike that balance. This is probably maybe one extreme, like the Kanban board is like you don't think, you just drag between.
Right.
The other extreme would be a virtual whiteboard where, frankly, I think it's too difficult to use in a thrashing environment.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about where in the middle you guys. I'm trying to find the place in the middle.
We haven't settled on what
We haven't settled.
flashing in a virtual whiteboard is yet, because we haven't found a good solution to even have something that is bidirectional, even or unidirectional rather, that feels nice.
By directional, you mean when you make a change, somebody else can.
etiquette?
Right. So a good example would be, we have a whiteboard here. We can point a camera at it so that the consumers can observe, but they can't participate.
If they want to participate, they have to start up a new thing and send the link around, and then they'll draw on their laptop or whatever, and then
Right.
you're collaborating on two different things.
Right. Yeah.
Each participant has to basically like reset and then somehow transmit.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think we have a good
Yeah. We haven't
solution or
really-
even solid ideas of what that feels like.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's try something out.
All right.
Please go ahead and sign up, or join beta waitlist rather.
Okay, we'll do that.
Same thing.
Google.
Please. Do you guys have any qualms about signing up for a service with Google? Through Google?
No.
What permissions do you use?
No.
Cool. That's fine.
Then I'm going to have to go into my database and make you
Okay.
flag you.
All right. So I'm going to create an organization first.
Yes. Go ahead and create an org.
Let's do SkySpecs beta.
He's got a browser alert that you guys can't see.
Is this your thing?
Yeah. Cool. And I lost my Wi-Fi, but I'm doing it on my phone, so it just takes a second.
Do you use this?
No, because I don't have to log in and Google or two-factor and all that. It should be just a second. All right, you're in.
Oh, no. Okay.
I had a coffee meeting with somebody recently. He was like, "Dude, I'm so excited! I gotta tell you something." I was like, "What?" He's like, "I cracked the code." I was like, "That's the greatest thing you could tell me."
Yeah.
So excited.
What code?
Right. Well. Okay, so.
I just gotta say, I
Obviously-
love that the cursor on my screen is different than the one that's being casted. You notice that?
That is
What
very
is-
curious, isn't it?
What's the one on your screen?
Come check it.
It's like, what are you running? Is this Linux?
This is, Linux. It's meant using S3, but that see how my hand looks here versus what's being
Oh
casted?
yeah, it's like the.
It's a different
that one
pointer.
versus that.
Yeah, I think it's because it's actually rendering.
In like a,
It's rendering its own version of the browser. Because
Yeah.
Chromecast,
it's not just a
it's not a
screencast.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's actually using its own internet connection. To,
Yeah.
Wild.
That is wild.
All right.
Okay, so.
Well, I feel like new board is the
No,
only option we have here.
Oh my god. We're a little late on onboarding.
really, really high
Just
importance.
created
Yeah.
a new board called Demo Session. It created, it popped in. QR code, I like that. Replay, cast, external anomalies. All right. When this board is me.
So I assume I don't have to give you guys a ton of prompting to get in that QR code. So what's happening over there? Do you have any? are you
Oh, I'm
going
just
to-
sending it to myself on the computer because
Oh, okay.
I don't want to just open it on my phone. I'd rather use the
Interesting.
desktop.
Okay.
Take all my stuff.
What?
No, it's like I'm like that.
Oh, okay. Hey, all right, good.
Sam.
It's not completely broken.
Oh, Firebase, cool.
Yeah, this is all running on the Firebase database and
Look at
hosting.
Eric using SkySpecs logo for himself.
It's because
He
I
is
have my
Sky
personal
Specs.
and my Sky Specs, but they're both named Eric.
Oh, I know.
So I don't use the same
So you use that
thing.
to
So I use that.
differentiate?
It's literally just for me, so
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
be like, oh, this is my Sky Specs one, and I don't care.
I
All
have
right.
a
Can't see
less
my
professional picture. I use my personal one. I'm like, oh, that's the one I was like, not dressed well enough. This is my personal. So obviously, again, this is early stages. But what do you notice about the screen? What are you seeing? First impressions?
Joining was easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
That's the the primary thing here.
It took me a minute to see the new slide in the bottom corner.
Yeah.
Step up that to me right away
Oh.
because I tend to look at the corners of
Mhm.
interfaces pretty quickly
Interesting.
because that's where people hide things.
That's
It
what the
used-
gold is.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. It used to be big and blue, and I refactored it and broke it.
The first thing I see is that, like, how do I invite someone? Am I gonna have to send them a link? That was my first thing.
And was that quickly answered, or still a little?
I still don't know how I would. I
Yeah.
can't send an invite. I would have to
Right,
copy
right,
the link
right,
and
right,
paste
right,
it.
You have to leave
Yeah.
and do something somewhere else.
So
Which
it
is
happened
fine.
to work. You guys are comfortable with QR codes, but without
Yeah,
that,
the
it would have
first
been
thing
a
I saw
little.
was the QR code. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll just scan that and I'll be in.
Yeah.
But that presumes that we're here.
Right. It
Yes.
presumes that we're here, and that also kind of forces the mobile format, right? Like, I didn't want to use the mobile format for
Right,
this,
and
so
then you send it
I
to us.
went through the workflow of
Totally.
scanning it and sending myself the link to open
Yeah.
up.
Like, how do I get
Computer.
someone that's remote into this easily without just copying the link and pasting it to 17 people?
What would your dream world scenario for that be?
No. Like, put in a handful of email addresses,
Yeah.
post to a Slack channel, having some kind of messaging integration.
And
I don't
it's
know.
possible
Totally.
that once you create your organization and as you invite more people, once you go through this process again, you can just select them and send out that invite because
Yeah.
they're already kind of related to your organization.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
You
So,
guys are. This is a. I'm telling you, this is super useful and helpful. All right. So.
I'm assuming I need to do a new slide. I don't have a concept of what slides are.
Yeah. What is a slide?
I don't know, it feels like a presentation to me.
Yeah. So you're like, what am I in PowerPoint right now?
Yeah.
Or a playground.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, get ready. You don't even know what's gonna happen.
Water park.
The first thing I want to do is, like, I want to
Can I
click
close
this
this?
X. Does that kill the meeting or does it kill the overlay?
Oh, good question.
yeah, what does that do?
I'm gonna pretend like I don't know. Oh my god, that's the tiniest drone I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yes.
Who's flying it?
Hello.
Ricardo.
Okay. I'm gonna hit a new slide.
Okay, what do you see here?
The first thing I notice is new slide turned into start, which immediately turned into finish.
What the hell?
I don't know what start was supposed to do. If I clicked on it really quickly, what would it have done? I'm assuming it just
Totally.
immediately created a new slide and then turned into some sort of presentation mode. I don't know.
Yeah. We also have the option to input and share an idea, but I don't know why. Or what
Well, we're gonna figure
Well,
out.
we have to type a question too.
Oh, I didn't even see that. The
I
first
saw,
thing
I
I did,
saw that. Yeah, I'm
I
a
was
little.
drawn
It's
to
a,
the input.
I was a little confused because like the input is very obvious. Type an idea is like this is a box input with a action button, whereas the type of question is one of those like soft inputs that's
Yeah.
just like, oh, you can write here, and it's
Yeah.
like very fluid, and it becomes the header.
Yeah.
I was considering, you saw here there were prompts to name your organization and name your slide, just like quick browser prompts. I was thinking of doing that for every new quote slide so that you
Wouldn't
just
be a terrible
ask it,
idea, yeah.
have a little bit more of a prompt. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so again, there's no onboarding or education in this whatsoever, so it's
Right.
natural that this is going to be a little bumpy for you guys
Yeah.
to figure out.
What do you all see?
I see the same thing without
Okay.
any of the controls, the meta controls.
Ah, okay.
So I basically just see the top left corner and no delete slide.
Okay.
Got some good push.
Also, I can't
What's that?
edit the header.
Question updated.
Oh, yeah.
I've noticed several things have updated without any refreshes.
Firebase real-time database,
Firebase
baby.
real time. Actually,
Wait,
it's
are you
Firestore.
using Firestore?
Yeah.
Real-time Firestore, baby.
I'll show you a video later if you want to see me bash my head against the wall for hours on end about how to freaking get Firestore security rules to work for this.
Yeah, I hate. That's the biggest problem with Firebase. Is
I,
just,
yeah.
have you
I
heard,
love them now that I know how they work.
Have you heard of Bolt?
No.
I think that's what it's called. We'll talk.
Oh, is
we'll
it?
talk later.
That might be for real time database. Yeah, we got.
Oh, that might be. That might be. Yeah. Okay, never mind.
Someone add an idea. Someone that's not me.
So I think my dream scenario is that there would be some like a little bit of a prompt and structure around requesting ideas, and I think that would have been helpful here. Maybe if there was a little bit more hand-holding experience.
Yeah, maybe.
To say like, this is what you do next.
Yeah. Tap to reveal.
Why would that be a thing?
So people could probably jam out their ideas in a neutral space before you have to
Yeah.
present them.
Were you guys thinking that too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't super weird and crazy.
We've actually, the Parable tool that we've been using for the last retro has a similar, like it gives you a period of time to pound in topics, and then you review all those topics together.
Gotcha.
And there's like a data entry.
I find it interesting that I can like this before I know what it is.
So the other thing
It's
is,
interesting to say.
I am very confused. Without seeing the tap to reveal, I'm very confused about what I'm seeing right here on my screen.
Yeah.
So for
So you're not seeing
reference,
a lot.
it's just the same box, but just with ... and no understanding.
That-
of
that you're
what-
waiting for me
yeah,
to
that I'm
reveal
waiting
it.
for you to
Because
reveal
I'm
it.
hosting
I
this
didn't. I
meeting.
don't know what this element is.
Yeah.
So
Like I didn't know that it was something I submitted that
Yeah.
now has to be revealed.
it's my job as the curator
interesting.
of this meeting to
Yeah.
guide the discussion through.
My assumption, being able to see this screen and look at mine, was that the font size was such that it was overflowing and the text was actually above the button
Ah,
space.
that's because you're a developer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
say that again.
I see the ... at the end of tap to
Oh.
reveal. So I was thinking like tap to reveal was
What
like
reveal
the end
what?
of the content block, and it was like wrapping the ...
It's actually a dramatic ellipse.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. I'm gonna reveal. Okay, yeah, that was mine.
Okay, so I can see that.
Okay.
Whatever, man.
That's amazing.
Can I change the colors? Mustard yellow is
How would you change the colors if you thought maybe you could?
in the context menu,
That makes
I
sense.
assume.
And now we'll tell you
like
if
a
the
little,
answer is
little
no.
palette circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And what would you want to change the colors for? I can think of some reasons, but I'm curious what you think.
I think it's ugly.
Categorization.
What's that?
Yellow feels like caution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it also just feels like a post-it note.
I think that's
a
the
stock
intent.
post-it note. Yeah, no, but like a
What
lot of
did you
different
say?
post-it notes.
I think that's the intent, to make it look
Yeah.
like a post-it note, but I just don't like yellow.
Okay.
So in Google Keep, it will often start out as a yellow, but I will, for my grocery list, make it green. And like you can pick colors that
Yeah.
will give topical inference.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I do use that feature in Keep.
Makes sense.
I'm gonna go to new slide without revealing it. Oh, why'd it go over there?
I'll tell you, I have no idea.
Because
Let the
Because-
mystery be.
That's how I designed it. I have no idea why I did. I think I have just no sorting happening on these whatsoever.
What happens if I hit refresh?
Do they maintain sort?
Oh,
Should I do that?
yeah, sure.
Nope.
Yeah.
Oh god.
I can't believe you didn't do baby episode.
I think that's the first extremely long post. I have like a thing in my backlog that's like, make sure the post-its don't become so long that it breaks the entire app.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it hasn't happened yet, so Icebox. Well, now it happens. Now I gotta build it.
There's always that one asshole.
Yeah. That's actually what I'm doing. Is like I'm just starting to see which of all the possible things you could break, you do break, so I can
Yeah.
know which ones to fix.
Yeah.
QA engineer walks into a bar, orders a beer, orders 500 beers, orders -1 beers. Finally orders 1 beer, gets it, signs off on it. They ship it, customer comes in, asks for the bathroom, entire bar burns down.
When I mouse over this, I see that I have a pointer cursor, which suggests I can
What does it do?
interact with it, but all it does is
Yeah.
select text.
It does nothing.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I think I
I'm
have
giving
put
you like
No, this is great. You guys,
Yeah.
this is super. You guys know how software works. This
Yeah.
is really, really helpful.
Can I see who liked this? No.
Good question. That would
Should
be-
I be able to?
Do you? Yeah. What do you think?
Configurable.
On your level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter?
I'd maybe even have the owner of ideas configurable. Like I can see that this was Eric's idea. Maybe we don't want.
Maybe we want an
Maybe we
anonymous
want
session.
Yeah.
a judgment-free idea space, so I could be free to put my shitty ideas up there, and we don't have to own them. We can just put them
Yeah.
out there.
What default do you want? What would be the default?
I think the default should be to show
Just
names.
to show, yeah, show
Okay.
who
It
made
should-
it,
it should-
show who liked it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So you have the option to hide
Yeah.
rather than option to reveal.
Yeah, I could definitely see it in the first view, kind of where you're setting everything up with the what does this thing do.
Particularly if you want to promote maybe more timid voices.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Maybe make it okay that
Yeah.
you don't have to own the ideas, and it doesn't matter who owns it.
But we're
we'll
gonna
go
discuss
through
it.
and we'll talk about them. I think that would be valuable.
Cool.
Awesome.
So, you gonna do a new slide? Or are we done?
Could I ask you guys to, who would run a mini retro here right now? Could we do 2 questions with a couple minutes each on what is working well about Shuffleboard and what's not working well?
Sure.
Sure.
Would you mind running it for me?
Running retro
Yeah. You know,
Alright.
nothing strict, just.
via Shuffleboard.
Yes, please.
Okay. Try something right now, but I don't know.
What do you think?
As he's typing, when I hit back, what's going to happen?
I would tell you is that the state of the slide that you're on is synced across all devices, so it'll immediately show a waiting room for him and delete all anything he's in the middle of writing.
Okay.
That's kind of a problem. Or it could be. I wonder if I'd want to
It could be.
not have that happen.
What would happen if you are running this board from a mobile device and you have to switch contexts? If I have to like check an email that just came in, does that bump everybody?
I doubt it. I don't think it's probably present state, right? The host device probably just issues.
Could be back. I mean, but the state of the browser could be background.
The state is saved. The state of what slide the board is on is
Mhm.
saved in the database and
Yeah.
synced to everybody. If the host leaves, then I believe the state will stay the same, and you guys could probably keep working.
Okay.
If
But
you
you
if
couldn't
you end the
finish it.
meeting, you could no longer get access to the slide. Like you can put us on any slide you want. The purpose there being like you shouldn't have to like follow along. You should just be able to type and then put your phone down again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that expected?
Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah.
So before we just dive in, like, how do you, when you're running retros, like, generally see when people are done typing, and
Well, that was what made me think of that. Like, if I'm remote, I don't know at what point I should start revealing, unless I'm also on voice chat at the same time and say,
Yeah.
"Are y'all ready?" Right?
How does it work in Parable?
They literally just give you a time window.
We have a time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the response period is time boxed, and then afterwards you just leave the
Right.
entry state.
And then it enters a state of like liking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you review, and you can drag and drop
you
and group them.
You group them,
and
then
people
you,
can
you like
thumbs
them.
up.
Yeah, and you have a set number of likes.
Yeah,
to
you're
focus
given an
discussion.
allowance
Yeah.
for likes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to check this out, 'cause that sounds pretty similar.
Yeah, you should definitely check out Parable, because I feel like
It's
it
kind of very
has a lot of
specifically
overlap.
for those
It's
kinds
just
of things.
retros.
Very specific for retros.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you like that? First, 2 questions. How do you like the time-bound nature of that? Like having a strict window to.
We've had problems getting through topics. So I mean, on the one hand, I don't like being constrained. On the other hand, we have real constraints of time.
Yeah.
So I thought it allowed us to stay focused and actually get through a large body of information. We actually went a few minutes over, but it was our first time using it. And in the past, we had gotten through like 40 to 50% of the topics, and then we ran out of time.
Yeah, I think what really, like, I don't know that time boxing is the best mechanism for limiting that, but I feel like it was good enough. Where I feel like it really shined was in the grouping and like the prioritizing of it, because you could kind of group them by idea, even if they're in different columns,
Right.
and then everyone would kind of vote on the things they wanted to talk about most, so that you were always talking about the most wanted discussion topic.
Cool.
For the
Yeah.
list. So even at the end of the list, like, you don't necessarily have to go through all the things that no one actually cares to talk about. They're just kind of throwaways that you can list off and then move on.
I'm definitely curious to see how they did that.
Yeah.
What about like voting mode? It sounds like it's sort of a mode thing. You're either in input
Yeah.
mode or vote mode.
So in their sidebar, they have like a bunch of different phases of the retro. So they'll have like idea generation, and then they'll have grouping, and they'll have voting, and they'll have discussion or
Gotcha.
whatever. So you just kind of move through those phases in the sidebar, and then the main view changes to a different mode. So yeah.
I mean, one thing I'm trying to balance is like how much this should be in the sort of the Trello board is not modal, right? It's just like you're moving things around. It's like a collaborative workspace, like a whiteboard would be, versus like retros on like Rails or a meeting on Rails. Originally, this was actually a little bit even more like focused down that path, and I'm trying to figure out how to hit the best of both worlds and how you sort of imagine that Thrash world being.
Yeah.
Do you think that one of the biggest issues with Thrash world is that it just goes off in all these different directions?
Sorry.
Or is there
Can we redefine what Thrash World is? I think I missed that. It seems like it's already a shared vernacular.
It's a Thunderdome. No, it's basically the idea of, we have a problem, how do we solve it? There are different voices and different stakeholders, and there is a process in which we go back and forth and like raise issues in our posts as to what is the proper path to take, and then at some point we arrive at consensus on what to do, and then that arrival should be somehow documented somewhere.
Okay.
And the idea is like, if there is a way to have like a Git log of that thrashing process,
Okay.
that would allow you to go back into the context of the discussion when you're trying to figure out like, hey, this worked really well or it failed miserably, how did we get here?
Okay.
Yeah. So you have ideas, mutate those ideas. Some are promoted into sort of like concrete concepts, and like a decision is made. Whether or not it's actually consensus.
Right.
right?
A decision is made, and the tracking mutation of the ideas that led to that decision is the thrash process. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's for you.
It's just a white claw.
It's got a bow on it.
Yeah.
So I guess
Okay,
I'm
cool,
trying to
thanks.
figure out like, okay, that Thrash world could be like a Shuffleboard implies sort of like a collaboration space, but there, the slide models you can see is a little bit more like one at a time, walking you through something.
I was going to ask you, what's the shuffle?
It's the first name I thought of, and I just bought the domain because it was Get Shuffleboard is available, and I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
If I get to the point where I feel like I have a really strong fit with like what exactly this thing needs to be, I might rename it to something that makes more sense.
Yeah.
The idea of Shuffle. Oh, by the way, the other idea with Shuffle is that like eventually these will be things you can drag and drop, rearrange, combine. Like the standard thing that I do that really originally inspired this was like all the design workshops every designer runs, which is where you have post-its, you group them, you sort them into columns for like journey maps, and then you dot vote sticky things. So just a general sense that it was thrashy is what I was trying to get at.
Are you gonna join us?
Sure. What's this?
We're looking at a collaborative tool in the early stages and providing feedback on what our challenges are. And
Yeah, so this is an interesting situation. If we have a team member that is late to a meeting and still wants to participate, is there a mechanism for us to do that?
How do I get him the QR code or the link from here?
we gotta exit out.
Do I have to kill the meeting? Or are you just fucked?
I wasn't in this.
Get out, Brandon. Get on. Go on, boy.
There
Get
goes an opportunity for collaboration. Okay, well, what would you do if you were in this scenario? Usability test, yeah. Like if this happened, how much time would you spend trying to figure out a way? And what would that be until you gave up? Would you assume that there is a way?
I would assume that there was a way.
Yeah.
I don't see a way here.
I would expect I could go up
Yes.
to this user list
Totally.
And just
you can
like-
hit like
Hit
plus
add,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. And then ad hoc.
and have
drop
just
somebody in.
like something pop up that
Yeah,
presents
totally.
the QR and the link, and I could just
Totally.
have them
Totally.
drop in where we're at.
Totally.
Right? So
You could hit back and go to the first screen if you wanted to. For now, if you want to join us. By the way, we're recording this session. I
Right.
put that online. So
Cool.
if you have any personal secrets you don't want to share with the world, don't.
so
say
don't
them.
like blurt out, you know.
Don't
password.
put any private keys.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
so
sure-
much
I'm
more
sure you know.
serious.
Hunter too.
Do you want to join us?
Sure.
Do you have your phone on you?
Yeah. The QR. I don't even think I have a QR reader.
Do you have Google Lens?
Nah, I don't think so.
Do you have an iPhone?
Do you have a
Do you not
Pixel?
work in a warehouse?
If you have a Pixel, you can just open Assistant and then
Oh, really?
swipe.
Assistant doesn't?
Yeah. So swipe up, and then hit
You know, fine.
this guy.
Yeah, I'll pop out in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually have to have that in 10 minutes too.
Go through the really.
It's funny, I instinctively went to the TV even though he had it on his screen. It would have been
Yeah.
a much shorter journey and probably easier to line up.
I'm curious if you, because I wonder how, if you, because I've been able to take pictures just by zooming in from where I'm at. But you guys generally aligned
At
it. I
angles,
wonder if
yeah.
it'd be.
Are you in? Alright.
Yeah, it occurred to me that I could open up Google Lens, but I just,
Oh.
for some reason, opt for like the much shittier QR code app that'll just say, here's the URL, and I just say open in a browser.
Yeah.
Because I don't trust most of Google's stock apps.
Yeah.
Not
Alright, do you want to go through these?
Yes, please. Visually, we mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Uh
Uh-oh.
oh. Good luck liking that one.
Alright.
Cool. Makes sense. Appreciate it. Are you twice clicking? What's going on?
It's
there?
just my trackpad.
Oh, you're trying.
It has nothing. I'm just hitting the wrong spot.
Okay.
Because-
That's something I can really do.
because
Is
I
that user
didn't-
error?
No, it's my configuration because I had to be an asshole and go man to night 3 and that kind of messed with the default track tab
I've already
settings
lost
because it
interest.
doesn't.
Sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of that wonderful nothing single piece of aluminum that does everything for me.
Let's not talk about that.
Want to get
because
into a battle about
Is that
Mac
yours?
versus
Yeah. I'm going out of town this weekend, so I want
We've,
to just use my personal thing.
We've been having Mac conversations.
Oh, I bet.
That is dope.
What just happened?
What's the Moft stand?
I've already lost interest.
I'll show you more later.
All right, so let's get through these because I wanted to get some. I wanted your negative feedback more than I want this, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we
Well,
have
this is
to
the
do
one. This is what's working well. So
Yeah.
we gotta move on to the.
It's basically
Joining is good. I wish we could drag those on top of each other, but I'm still learning how to do that. Where's space? Topics is okay. So usability is looking pretty good. There were a couple bumps, obviously. Visually, language, you know, it hasn't gotten a huge investment, but might not need a ton more.
Mm.
So that's good to hear. Usability, I would give it like a. Sounds like we're in like the B- realm, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I think the biggest thing that was confusing for me was just the whole title versus type
Yeah.
and idea
Mm,
thing. That
okay.
one I just didn't understand why there were two
Yeah.
different types of input.
I'd love to
I
be able to
can fix the
navigate this
relationship.
as the facilitator with controls. The keyboard.
Totally.
Like,
Okay. Yeah.
Like go right
That was
into
good.
the reveal.
Yeah, just
I don't
yeah.
click.
Clicking's annoying, huh?
Space.
Yeah, or maybe even highlighting the most recently revealed one, giving it some sudden
Mm.
call out instead of just trying to notice the difference.
Totally. Yeah, I have some ideas around that. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Technology's working good. All right. We can go better.
All right. Buckle up.
You can't hurt me. I've been through this enough.
He has this calm exterior, but inside's just
Boiling.
yeah, it's just It's just pickled and gray and withered.
I feel like one thing that, well, first of all, yes, but second of all, like there's something really nice about showing people the early product because
Yeah.
I know it sucks. Like I
Yeah.
agree with everything you
That's
guys
the
are
point.
saying, and it's like it's so much nicer not to show something that you think is perfect and to find out that it's not,
Yeah.
versus showing something that you know isn't right. I usually encourage people to focus on quantity here. It's like as many as you can come up with. I want to hear them.
Oh, autocomplete.
Well, that's good stuff. I'm thinking about in the future that shows people typing in the upper right.
Yeah. I
That'd be
would
useful.
agree.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can know who's typing and
Okay.
One more from there.
So maybe I'll ask you guys as these go to, since we got a lot, I know we're going to have to get through very
Yeah.
quickly because we both got to run. If you wouldn't mind, just if the pop-ups work on the phone, because I know there's a
Yeah.
Z-index thing, just like the ones that you think are most relevant to you as you go.
okay.
All right.
All right. Let's go ahead and go. First one.
Yeah, sounds like, was that, you say that or somebody else?
I did.
I did that. I said that.
Is that on your phone or on the TV or both?
A little bit on the phone, less so just because it's an incredibly like
Ah.
high saturation,
Yeah.
the level of like color depth is very high, so it's easier to distinguish the soft
Yeah.
periwinkle against the white.
Not so much.
It's
Yeah.
very difficult to see the
TV
boundaries
color
between
suck.
elements.
Totally.
Can't see the controls right here.
No. Overlapping, yeah.
Yeah, and this is.
Well, maybe nobody's gonna be able to like anything.
Yeah, it happens in the phone too.
Yeah.
Okay.
See the Z index on the pop over.
Well, that makes sense because I haven't defined. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not that I built it; it didn't work. I just haven't even considered it. But it will be broken for sure. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, what if I type it? It's like shit.
You want to have your space before it gets blasted out.
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
Okay.
Because once it's in the
Oh,
mix,
you see our ellipses.
Yeah.
You know you put it there, but you
well,
know which one
I
it
have
is.
to count on that too.
Totally.
But yeah, I have no idea which is mine now that it's in the mix.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it's like fire and forget.
Yep.
It's maize and blue. What other colors do you need in Ann Arbor? Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Oh, interesting. I just added that one.
Did you really?
Yeah.
this order is. When you added one before.
Look at that one.
Now, does that mean that you would prefer them to be ordered by time, or that you would prefer to like choose an order?
Any. There's no option for any.
What would you want it to be then?
Configurable by the host.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know that rings as important to me in this context.
Right.
But it is as an engineer weird just to see them
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Yeah.
the last entered is like fifth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like a default for just time
Yeah.
is fine.
Start with that for
Right.
sure. Okay. A little more contextual grounding. Would somebody explain that?
Yeah, like I just, especially on the phone where I like can't see, all I see are the ellipses. I have no idea what things are. Like, after a little bit of use, I understand where I am, but coming to it cold, it's sparse, and that's not a bad thing. But I don't necessarily understand, like, are there other contexts I can jump to? Do I have to leave this space? And we've spent a little bit of time. What's the consequence of hitting the X on the top?
Yeah.
We still haven't
I
done
have that in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which also makes me think: do they need to see? Do all the users need to see all the cards, or should it be list like 24 ideas and present? Like, if they're on the phone, is it too much noise as the presenter? When I tap to reveal, should that one be the one that's revealed?
Right.
And
Should
they
it
can
just
use
appear out of nowhere or keep its
Or is it like
representation?
playing Guess Who?
Yeah.
Right.
When you're flipping cards.
When you say context, you don't mean context like navigation within other parts of the app as much as you mean I want to know what's happening in my meeting right now.
I do mean both. Like,
Okay.
there is a part of me that's like wondering if there's ever going to be like a sidebar where I can jump to another part of the application, or if this is the only context that the app becomes.
And do you mean on your phone or on the screen?
Yes.
Both. Okay. Keep liking the ones that make sense to you guys if you wouldn't mind. Customization.
Yeah, I
Yep,
think that's what
makes
we're
sense.
talking
Gotcha. Vacuums. What does that mean?
What sucks? Eric.
Womp womp.
That wasn't me.
I'm so glad you joined us. God, yeah, we talked about that already,
Yeah.
right? Makes sense. Mobile version is different in every way. Somebody explain that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, I don't know why I wouldn't be able to see tap to reveal
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I also don't like. There's other aspects. I guess this is just part of the admin controls. Like, I don't have any control over my.
Do you have an X button at the top?
Nope.
Okay.
I have no navigational controls.
Okay.
What would you want?
I don't know.
It's on purpose, is what I'm saying. 'Cause I don't want you to go down.
I'm just like, I don't understand why.
Okay. Maybe a little introduction. Why?
Yeah.
why-
Well, and I don't have the ability to. I guess I shouldn't have the ability to delete the slide. I also can't see who else is in the meeting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I can just see me.
Yeah.
Actually, that's really interesting. I could explain why. But sure. I mean, the reason was that originally it was there so you could see who you were logged in as, and then I just moved those to the upper right corner, and they look exactly the same. Do you want to see on your phone?
Yeah.
At the very least, I would like to see a ... that I can like expand down. Like, I totally get I'm logged in as me, and therefore I should see my account token.
Yep.
But I also would like to know who I'm sharing with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'd like to know who else is here, and not just infer it through the card authors.
Gotcha.
All right.
That's a good point. There might be non-contributors who are observing.
Yeah.
Right. Totally.
All right. Similar ideas, duplicates.
Yep.
Totally.
Talk about that.
Understand the value prop. Yeah. So that homepage, just a little bit more clarity on that.
Yep.
Or a lot more. Totally. Record discussion of posted.
Yeah, so we're saying a lot of things that aren't necessarily just in the post-it notes here. Like, we've put our ideas out in the world, and now we're kind of talking about them, and
We're not. Yeah.
And that's
learning
actually an
about
issue
the-
with Parabol too.
Yeah.
What we're struggling with. Where
that
it's like,
only has a way to record action items from a post-it note. It doesn't have a way to
Conversation.
just like include metadata about the
Gotcha.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
being able to actually open up an input space on each card where other people could contribute
Yeah.
paragraphs to each card and have
Totally.
it branch down.
Very, very true.
Participants.
Would comments solve that?
Comment format is fine.
If you had comments, would that be like 95% of that issue?
I think so. Yeah.
I'd love to be able to tag things, add arbitrary data,
Yes.
and an API that we can suck
Yes.
things out of.
Tagging.
Yes, 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 yes.
Sorry, what would you tag?
What topic are we
People,
going
Notes.
topic,
Projects.
Oh, so just kind of like arbitrary tags the same way we do for like work orders and shit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So you could feel exposed.
Everything from like, what team are we on?
Yeah.
What are we talking
Talking
about?
ideas.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. Just whatever I'm doing, and maybe just a little bit of. I mean, I think one big path I want to do on this whole thing is just onboarding. Like, why are you in this thing, and what are we doing here today?
Yeah,
A little
right.
more clarity around that. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Not that difficult in CSS these days.
Oh shit, I gotta go.
Okay.
But I kind of want to see the rest of these.
Holy
Interesting.
moly.
I just added this.
Yeah.
It was a
Oh,
bit
weird, and this is more of, I think, an Android mobile thing, but when you scan a QR code and then open it, it will use Google Lens's internal browser,
Oh,
and not the
that's
Google
annoying.
Chrome browser. So if you're not logged in with your Google accounts,
Oh, that's annoying.
Does it have the option in the upper right to go dot 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 open in browser?
I didn't see that.
That was me.
We'll find out at the end. That'll be the last thing we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you shouldn't be able to do.
Right.
But
Yes.
categorization. Is
Unless
that
you
like-
are appreciating its chaos.
It is funny that those are in the same column.
Right?
Yeah. which is-
Right below the no ordering.
I'm really curious to see what happens when you click this because it's probably going to screw up the
Yeah.
other
Oh, are
slides.
these all fixed?
Yeah, those are things. Can't view other slides in this context, meaning.
So like, we can't compare to what's good. So like the
Yeah.
last slide where we talked about all
Oh,
the good
right,
things,
right.
like this is now only focused on what sucks. It does not.
totally.
That is one interesting you can do in Parable. If you have good, meh, bad columns, if you have the same three ideas, you can group them.
still
It
group
keeps
them.
an icon referencing what the emotion was about it, but they're the same idea.
I gotta see that tool for sure. And is that similar?
Yeah. So, like, even if I had what's
Thanks,
good
Sam.
and what sucks next to each other, is there a relationship between? Are they connected in some way? Are the questions connected? You know.
Okay, cool.
So. Oh yeah, back hangs out here over.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what.
I can figure that out. So,
What is? Oh,
What's
okay.
the difference between the finish and the X?
Well,
I don't know which one I want to hit.
I'll tell you this: if you hit finish, the X will still be there, so you can hit that too.
Okay.
if we hit restart,
Thank you, this is great.
Thank you.
if we hit restart, will that save all our data? Will that basically run the same thing again and
Oh,
write
hard
it,
to know.
or will it
Yeah,
like
good
do a
question.
new one?
Yeah.
Keeps it.
That's what I
That's fixing the
assumed,
beginning.
but there's that little bit of
Yeah, that's a little
uncertainty that's
scary.
like, do I actually want to restart this? Will that overwrite my data?
Okay.
Totally.
Now, what just happened for y'all? Are you guys still in it?
I'm still in the
Yep, still in.
I'm still in what sucks.
Can you edit anything?
I can't. I can add stuff.
Okay. So that it exists there.
It exists, and that's the state that it's.
Yeah. This is just the X is my participation in it.
Yeah.
Gotta
Okay,
go.
Interesting.
I do.
I can't leave
unfortunately.
though.
Yeah, you can't leave.
Just gotta close it.
You can. Yeah. What would you expect? What do you want? Where would you want to go?
I would want a way for me to leave this view. Like, I want an X. Why do you get an X? I want an X. Mom said it's my turn to play on the Xbox.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Well, guys,
Just 'cause-
there's some
Sorry.
fundamental good insights here. There's a bunch of little small tweaks. Last question would be like, how likely do you think the tool as it is today would be? How likely is it that the tool as it exists today would be useful to you in a thrash session?
I think it would be good just to elicit ideas quickly. I don't know that it yet matches like the kind of idea connecting that we need.
Yeah, I would agree with
Graph or
that. I
graphing.
think at the very, very early stages of Thrash, where we're just kind of like, what are the needs, what are the things that we need to be aware of, I think that could be a really good tool for just idea generation. And
Yeah.
but
I think when the contents could be represented more as a graph with like nodes and links, right? Even if
Yeah.
that's like a group of these cards
Yeah.
as a single node.
Starting
referencing-
with the group. So, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And being able to tie groups together or define relationships, that would go a long way. And
Well-
being able to mark up, like add comments to cards.
Yeah. Okay.
those
I
would
think this has been so clarifying because I think I know what I want to build next, and I'd love to have you guys as early users. Whenever you feel it's useful, I'll keep you up to date on. I'll put you guys on the list or something. You can also go to the main. I'm turning this off right now. Goodbye, world.